Welcome to today's episode on gender-based violence among workers in informal sectors. I'm Acacia, and I'm thrilled to have you join me for this very important conversation. Gender-based violence is a pervasive issue that affects millions of workers worldwide, particularly those in informal sectors. These workers often operate outside the formal economy in roles such as domestic work, street vending, and waste picking. Due to the nature of their work, they are frequently exposed to various forms of violence and exploitation. In today's episode, we'll delve into the research findings on gender-based violence among informal sector workers, highlighting the key issues, challenges, and recommendations for improving worker protections. We'll explore how globalization has impacted these workers and examine the sources of power that contribute to their vulnerability. My goal is to provide a comprehensive overview that not only informs, but also inspires action. Whether you're a policymaker, advocate, or simply someone who cares about social justice, this episode will offer valuable insights and practical recommendations. So, let's get started by understanding what gender-based violence in informal sectors entails and why it's a critical issue that demands our attention.
Gender-based violence is defined as violence perpetrated against someone based on their biological sex or gender identity. It includes different forms of violence directed against a person, whether physical, psychological, sexual, or economical.
Gender-based violence is particularly prevalent among women in informal sectors. According to a study by the International Labor Organization, women in informal employment are more likely to experience violence due to their marginalized status and the lack of formal protections. In many cases, these workers operate in isolated environments, making them more vulnerable to abuse.
Most people enter the informal economy not by choice, but due to a lack of opportunities for formal work. They experience dangerous or precarious working conditions, low and irregular wages, have limited or no access to vocational opportunities and to social security benefits in the events of unemployment, work-related injuries, sickness, or childbirth. As a result, they are more likely to experience discrimination, exploitation, including forced labor and servitude, and just general abuse. Such practices often go undetected.
The concept of intersectionality is crucial in understanding gender-based violence in informal sectors. Intersectionality refers to how different aspects of a person's identity, such as their gender, race, or occupation, intersect and contribute to their experiences of discrimination and violence. For example, racialized women in informal sectors often face compounded discrimination and violence due to both their gender and race.
White American women's lived experience is not informed by racial oppression, generally not. And so the theories that they have developed about women's oppression are really tied to their experiences relative to men. And so white women have tended to develop theories that prioritize women's oppression within the household. But that is really not the experience, the lived experience of African American women or other racialized women within the United States. Our experiences, our lived experiences, are informed by our membership in racially oppressed communities. It affects our identities as women and also a sense of shared responsibility that we have to a community. And so my argument then is that what it means to be a woman and our experience of gender oppression is not just about relations within a private household relative to men, but also it's based on factors that are external to the household.
Many informal sector workers are economically dependent on their jobs, which can increase their vulnerability to gender-based violence. The lack of alternative employment opportunities means that workers may endure abusive situations to maintain their livelihoods. Social stigma associated with informal work can also contribute to gender-based violence. Workers in these sectors are often viewed as less valuable or respectable, which can lead to dehumanizing treatment and increased risk of violence. There is often a lack of awareness about gender-based violence among informal sector workers, and many cases go unreported. Fear of retaliation, lack of trust in authorities, and limited access to reporting mechanisms are significant barriers. Now that we have a clearer picture of what gender-based violence looks like in informal sectors, let's delve into the key issues and challenges these workers face. Globalization has led to increased informal work, often characterized by precarious conditions and lack of protections. This has heightened vulnerabilities to gender-based violence as workers are exposed to exploitative practices and unstable employment. For example, the integration of women into the global workforce has often resulted in low-wage, insecure jobs, particularly in sectors like textiles, agriculture, and the service industry. These roles are frequently poorly paid and lack job security, benefits, and workers' rights protection. Gender-based violence in informal sectors is perpetrated by various actors, including employers, state actors, and criminal elements. These sources of power exploit the lack of legal and social protections for informal workers. Employers may use their authority to harass or exploit workers, while state actors might enforce violent measures during lockdowns or curfews. Criminal elements can also take advantage of the vulnerable status of informal workers, subjecting them to extortion and violence. Informal workers often lack access to legal recourse and social protections, making it difficult to report and address gender-based violence. The absence of formal contracts and recognition increases their vulnerability. Expanding social protection coverage to these groups can reduce their vulnerability, improve income security and healthcare access, and help facilitate their transition to the formal economy. However, many countries with high rates of informality face formidable challenges in extending social protection to informal workers. The pandemic has worsened economic hardships and increased instances of gender-based violence among informal workers. Lockdowns and economic downturns have left many workers more exposed to violence and exploitation. For example, the physical and psychological impacts of gender-based violence can prevent women from leaving their homes or using public transportation to get to and from work. The informal sector lacks social and legal protections for formal recourse for gender-based violence in most countries, which makes it difficult for women to prevent violence or access compensation measures. With these challenges in mind, let's explore some recent research findings that shed light on the extent of gender-based violence in informal sectors. Recent studies highlight the widespread nature of gender-based violence in informal sectors. For example, research by GAATW Canada documents experiences of racialized women facing workplace violence. Another study by ICRW examines the gendered impact of COVID-19 on women in Uganda's informal economy. Additionally, a global scoping review published in BMJ Public Health explores how intersecting social identities impact women's access to gender-based violence support services. Personal stories from affected workers provide insight into the real-life impact of gender-based violence. For instance, a case study from South Africa highlights the experiences of Black African women street traders in Durban, who face various forms of violence due to economic and social vulnerabilities. Another case study from Tanzania reveals that 96% of women in Dar es Salaam's marketplaces experience some form of violence, with psychological and verbal abuse being the most common. Advocacy groups and organizations play a crucial role in documenting and addressing gender-based violence. For example, Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing works to improve the conditions of informal workers by advocating for the ratification of international conventions like ILO Convention 1906.
I'm Marty Chen. I'm a co-founder and international coordinator of WeGo. We are dedicated to supporting the working poor, especially women, in the informal economy. In today's global economy, employment is increasingly insecure. Our major concern is the majority of workers do not get protection through their work. They do not get health insurance, they do not get pensions, they do not get childcare. They do not have the protections to work their way out of poverty.
In Tanzania, the NGO Equality for Growth conducts anti-GBV campaigns, trains paralegals, and works with local leaders to address gender-based violence in marketplaces.
One of the issues or the gaps we have in gender-based violence generally is also access to justice. As we know, we have norms, societal norms, that promote or exacerbate occurrences of gender-based violence. So as an organization, International Atlas felt the need to use this 16 days activism to create awareness around access to justice and also address barriers that limit women and girls from accessing justice in the community as well as the society as a whole.
Given these findings, what can be done to improve protections for informal workers? Let's discuss some recommendations. Governments should ratify and implement international conventions like ILO Convention 1906, which addresses violence and harassment in the workplace. This would provide a legal framework for protecting informal workers from gender-based violence. Additionally, policies should be developed to ensure that informal workers have access to legal recourse and social protections. This includes extending labor rights to informal workers, providing them with access to healthcare, Social Security, and safe working conditions. Empowering informal workers through education, legal aid, and support services is essential. These strategies can help workers understand their rights and access necessary resources. For example, providing legal aid services can help workers navigate the legal system and seek justice for gender-based violence incidents. Education programs can help raise awareness about gender-based violence and inform workers about their rights and available support services. Additionally, support services such as counseling and shelters can provide immediate assistance to victims of gender-based violence. Grassroots movements and community-based approaches are effective in combating gender-based violence. Local initiatives can provide tailored support and foster a safer environment for informal workers. For instance, community engagement programs can involve local leaders, organizations, and residents in efforts to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. These programs can enhance community safety and security, foster self-referral to services, and promote a culture of reporting. Collaborative approaches that integrate gender-based violence prevention and response into broader development projects can also be beneficial. This includes working with project partners and teams to ensure commitment and support for gender-based violence initiatives. As we wrap up, let's recap the key points and consider how we can all contribute to this cause. Today, we've explored the critical issue of gender-based violence among workers in informal sectors. We've defined gender-based violence and provided examples of how it manifests in informal work environments. We've discussed the prevalence of gender-based violence, particularly among women, and examined the intersectionality of gender, race, and occupation. We've also highlighted the economic dependency and social stigma that contribute to gender-based violence, as well as the lack of awareness and reporting mechanisms. It's clear that addressing gender-based violence in informal sectors requires a multifaceted approach. Governments, organizations, and communities must work together to implement policies, provide support services, and empower workers. As listeners, you can contribute by supporting initiatives aimed at protecting informal workers, raising awareness about gender-based violence, and advocating for policy changes. Remember, every effort counts. By staying informed and taking action, we can help create a safer and more equitable working condition for all. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you found this discussion valuable, please subscribe to my podcast for more insightful episodes. Together, we can make a difference.